My name is Ella Ramirez. I am 31 years old. The day my parents crashed Grandpa Raymond's memorial planning meeting in Albuquerque changed everything. They had abandoned me at age 6 and stayed gone for 14 years until he passed 8 months ago. Now, in advisor Nicole Rivera's office with colleague Amanda Young beside me and sister-in-law Rachel Ramirez watching remotely, my mother said I had isolated him on purpose, and the community needed to hear the real story. My father then burst out demanding they lead the public tribute or they would release their version online immediately. My stomach dropped, but I resolved then and there to defend the truth and my life without them. If your parents ever tried to rewrite your past to suit their narrative, drop a like and share your story in the comments. I read them all, and it helps more than you know. That meeting was the start of the nightmare that unfolded over the next few weeks. But to understand how we got there, I have to take you back. I was 6 the afternoon. My mother and my father drove away from Grandpa Raymond's house in Albuquerque and never looked back. The sun was beating down on the driveway and I ran after their car until my legs gave out. Grandpa Raymond knelt beside me, brushed the dirt off my knees and said softly that some doors once closed should stay that way. He never rushed his words, and that day he carried me inside like I weighed nothing. From then on, he raised me alone, teaching me that integrity always mattered more than appearances. Life with him was steady and full of quiet lessons. Every morning, he would sit with his coffee and ask me to read the local news, then explain what the headlines were really hiding. He founded a small logistics firm that grew into something solid, but he never let the money change how he treated people. When I turned 12, he started bringing me to the community center he helped build where kids learned skills that could change their futures. He would spend hours there, kneeling beside them, showing them how to save their first paycheck. Power. He would tell me means nothing if you use it only to stand above others. Those weekends taught me more than any classroom ever could. By the time I turned 17, I was helping him at the office after school. He would hand me real contracts and say, figure out what they are not saying. I learned to see through polished words to the truth underneath. Grandpa Raymond never made me feel like a burden. Instead, he made me feel chosen. When he passed 8 months ago, the house felt too quiet and the community center seemed to echo with his voice. I handled the arrangements myself because I was the one who had stayed. I never expected my parents to show up, but they did the moment the obituary hit the local paper. The first sign of trouble came in a short email from my mother. She wrote that they deserved to be part of the memorial planning. I ignored it at first, but then my sister-in-law Rachel Ramirez called. Rachel is married to my older brother Michael, who had always stayed closer to my parents than to me. She said my mother was upset and that the family needed to present a united front at the public tribute. I agreed to the meeting with advisor Nicole Rivera, thinking it would be civil. Nicole had known Grandpa Raymond for years, and I trusted her to keep things fair. Amanda Young, my colleague from the elementary school where I work as a counselor, came with me for support. She knew parts of my story, and she insisted I should not face this alone. We gathered in Nicole's modest office on a Tuesday morning. My mother, Susan Ramirez, arrived first, her hair perfectly styled, and her expression already sharp. My father, John Ramirez, followed close behind, looking impatient as always. Rachel joined by video from her home across town, and Amanda sat right next to me. Nicole started by outlining the plans for the community tribute event scheduled for the following weekend, with 150 guests expected. That was when my mother spoke first, her voice low and cutting. Ella, you have kept us in the dark for 14 years. The community deserves the full picture of how you turned Grandpa Raymond against his own children. Her words landed like a slap. I felt my face heat, but I kept my voice steady. I did not turn anyone against anyone. He raised me because you left. My mother leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. We had our reasons, and now you are trying to erase us from his legacy. That is not going to happen. What happened next caught me completely off guard. My father, who had been tapping his fingers on the table, suddenly burst out with a defensive shout that filled the small room. My wife is right, and we are not leaving here until you agree to let us lead the tribute speech. We built this family name too, and you do not get to rewrite that alone." His reaction shocked me because it was an immediate aggressive push that turned the conversation into an ultimatum on the spot. Rachel on the video call nodded quickly, adding that the family needed to look united or people would talk. Amanda squeezed my hand under the table, but she stayed quiet, letting me handle it. I took a slow breath and looked straight at my mother. This tribute is about honoring the man who actually stayed. If you want to speak, you can submit something in writing, but I am not handing over the event. My mother smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. Then we will have to make sure the truth gets out another way. We have an old video from years ago that shows exactly how things were. My father did not back down. Instead, he stood up abruptly and said, "Think about your job at that school, Ella. Teachers cannot afford scandals." His words carried a new edge that made the air feel heavier. Nicole tried to steer the meeting back to logistics, but the damage was done. The threat hung there like a live wire. I left the office with Amanda walking beside me in silence until we reached the parking lot. "That was intense," she said quietly. "Your parents are playing dirty, and Rachel seems fully on their side." I nodded because she was right. Later that evening, I sat in my living room replaying the conversation. Grandpa Raymond's photo sat on the shelf, and I could almost hear him reminding me that truth in the wrong hands turns to poison. I had no idea how fast the poison would spread. The next morning at school, Amanda pulled me aside in the staff lounge. "I heard from a parent that your mother posted something on social media last night. It is gaining traction." My stomach tightened. I checked my phone, and there it was. A short video of my mother speaking directly to the camera about how her daughter had kept her from her own father in his final months. She never mentioned the abandonment or the 14 years of silence. Instead, she painted me as the one who created the distance. Comments were already pouring in, some from people in our Albuquerque community who knew Grandpa Raymond. The post had 300 shares in less than 12 hours. I called Nicole right away. She answered on the first ring, her voice calm but concerned. "Ella, this is escalating faster than I expected. Your father reached out to me privately this morning saying they want another meeting before the tribute." He sounded determined. I thanked her and hung up, feeling the walls closing in. That afternoon, my brother Michael texted me for the first time in months. "Mom and Dad are hurt. Maybe give them the platform they asked for." It is just one speech. His message felt like another layer of pressure coming from the same side. By evening, the video had reached 500 shares. Parents at my school started asking questions in the pickup line. Amanda stayed late with me in the office, helping me draft a short response, but we both knew it would not be enough. My mother called as I was driving home. "Ella, the video is only the beginning. If you do not step aside and let us speak at the tribute, we will release more. The community deserves to know who you really are." Her tone was cold and certain. I pulled over to the side of the road, my hands gripping the wheel. The resolve I had felt in the meeting was still there, but now it was mixed with a sharp fear that everything Grandpa Raymond had built for me could crumble under their lies. I sat there in the car for a long minute staring at the desert skyline. The sun was setting and the light caught the mountains in that way Grandpa always loved. I whispered to myself that I would not chase their approval the way I had chased their car all those years ago. But the phone buzzed again with a new text from my mother. It simply read, "24 hours, Ella. Then we go public with everything." The words sat on the screen like a ticking clock, and I knew the next move would decide whether I kept the life I had built or watched it burn in front of everyone who had ever trusted me. I stared at that text for what felt like forever before putting the phone down. But sleep did not come easy that night. The 24-hour deadline from my mother kept looping in my head. I called Amanda right away and told her everything. She listened without interrupting, then said she would meet me at school the next morning to figure out a plan. I also left a message for Nicole Rivera explaining the new threat about the old video. By the time I finally drifted off, the clock had already ticked past midnight. The next morning at the elementary school, the usual buzz of kids laughing in the hallways felt heavier than normal. I had barely set my bag down when Principal Laura Bennett knocked on my office door. She was a no-nonsense woman in her early 50s who had always been fair, but she looked tense today. "Ella, can we talk in my office for a minute?" Once we sat down, she slid her phone across the desk showing me the latest comments on my mother's post. "This video has reached over 800 shares now, and some parents are asking questions about your family situation. I support you, but the school board is watching our public image closely right now with the upcoming funding review." My stomach twisted because I knew exactly who was behind the sudden attention. Principal Laura Bennett was not blaming me, but the worry in her voice made it clear the pressure was building fast. She added that she had already fielded 2 calls from concerned families that morning. I thanked her for the heads up and promised to handle it, but inside I felt the walls of my safe professional world starting to crack. As I walked back to my office, Amanda was waiting outside with 2 coffees in hand. She handed me one and whispered that she had seen the shares climb overnight too. "Your parents are not playing around, Ella. We need to get ahead of this before it hits the tribute event in 2 days." Before I could respond, my phone rang. It was my mother. I stepped into an empty conference room and answered. Her voice came through sharp and laced with that familiar cold sarcasm. "Ella, you are really going to let your little job drama play out in front of everyone? The community already sees how you pushed us away all these years, and now you are dragging Grandpa Raymond's name through your selfish silence." She paused, then delivered the jab that cut deepest. "Some people are starting to wonder if you even cared about him, or if you just wanted the attention all to yourself." What happened next was the part that shocked me most. My father, who had been quiet on the line, suddenly jumped in with a reaction I had never heard from him before. Instead of backing her up with his usual impatient tone, he let out a short, forced laugh that sounded almost mocking, then pivoted straight into a calculated accusation. "My wife is right, but the truth is, Ella here has been rewriting our family story since she was 6 years old. If she does not step aside for the tribute, I will personally call that principal of hers myself and explain how she has kept us from honoring our own father. We built the community connections too, and she does not get to erase that." His words came out so cold and direct it left me frozen for a second because this was a deliberate power move that made the threat feel immediate and personal. I hung up before either of them could say more, my hands shaking. Amanda found me a minute later and I told her the whole conversation. She suggested we loop in Nicole Rivera right away for advice on how to protect the tribute event. We met Nicole at her office an hour later, and she introduced us to Kevin Morales, the community center director, who had worked closely with Grandpa Raymond for over 15 years. Kevin was a quiet, steady man with a firm handshake, and he listened as I explained the latest threats. "This is not just family drama anymore," he said. "The center has already received calls from people asking why the tribute is being politicized. Your mother reached out to me directly this morning claiming you blocked them from the planning on purpose." Nicole nodded and pulled out her notebook. "I spoke with attorney David Klein earlier today. He specializes in reputation cases like this, and he thinks we can file a quick cease and desist if they release anything defamatory about the abandonment. But it would mean going public with details you might want to keep private." We spent the next hour drafting a statement for the tribute, clarifying that the event was about Grandpa Raymond's legacy, not family disputes. Kevin Morales offered to moderate the speeches himself to keep things neutral, but he warned that my parents had already hinted they might show up anyway. By afternoon, the social media pressure had exploded again. My sister-in-law, Rachel Ramirez, texted me a screenshot of a new post my mother had made, tagging the community center and the school district. It showed an old family photo from when I was little cropped in a way that made it look like I was the one turning away from them. The caption read, 14 years of silence and now this. Some daughters forget where they came from. Rachel added her own message saying, Ella, the family is hurting and this is making us all look bad. Maybe just let them speak for 5 minutes at the event. Her words felt like another layer of betrayal, because she had always stayed closer to my parents than to me. I sat in my car after work staring at the growing comments under the post. Some were from people I knew from the center calling me ungrateful. Amanda had stayed late at school to cover for me, but even she could not shield me from the parents who started whispering when I walked past the pickup line. The fear that my job could slip away hit harder than I expected, because counseling those kids was the one thing that still felt like mine. Principal Laura Bennett had sent me a careful email reminding me that any more public drama could lead to a formal review. Attorney David Klein called me personally then, and his voice was calm but direct. "Ella, we can push back, but once the tribute happens tomorrow, the narrative might be set. Your parents are moving fast." That evening, I met Nicole and Kevin Morales again at the center to finalize the program. We had just locked in the order of speakers when my phone lit up with a call from my mother. I stepped outside to take it because I knew she would not stop. "Ella, the video we mentioned is ready to drop at midnight if you do not agree to our terms by 9 tomorrow morning. Your father and I deserve to tell our side, and the community will hear it one way or another." Her tone was pure ice, and I could hear my father in the background adding something low that I could not make out. The call ended before I could reply, and when I walked back inside, Kevin Morales looked at me with concern. "Whatever they just said, it is written all over your face." I told them the new deadline and the threat of the video. Nicole suggested we prepare a counter statement, but even she admitted the timing was brutal with the tribute less than 24 hours away. Amanda texted me a minute later saying another parent had forwarded the latest post to the school group chat and questions were spreading. The pressure felt like it was closing in from every direction. My job, my reputation, and the one event meant to honor the man who had actually raised me. I stood there in the quiet hallway of the community center feeling the weight of every choice ahead and wondering if fighting back would cost me more than I could afford to lose. Just as I was about to head home, my phone buzzed with a new notification. It was a direct message from an unknown number, but the preview showed a clip of the old video my parents had threatened. The thumbnail froze on a moment that looked damning out of context, and the message attached read, "Your move, Ella. The full version goes live at midnight unless you step aside." My heart slammed against my ribs because this was no longer just words. The tribute event was tomorrow, and whatever happened next would decide whether I kept any piece of the life Grandpa Raymond had helped me build or watched it get torn apart in front of the entire Albuquerque community. The message sat on my screen like a loaded gun, and I knew right then that midnight was not going to wait for me to make a perfect plan. I forwarded the thumbnail to attorney David Klein and Nicole Rivera with a quick note that the video was real and the deadline was hours away. Kevin Morales texted back almost immediately saying the community center had already started getting calls from people who had seen the teaser clip and that we needed to decide how to handle the tribute tomorrow morning. I barely slept again that night, but by dawn I had made up my mind. I was not stepping aside. Grandpa Raymond's life was not going to be rewritten by the two people who had walked out on it 14 years earlier. The tribute event was set for 10 o'clock at the community center with 150 guests expected, including families from the school and longtime neighbors. I arrived early with Amanda Young at my side. She had taken the morning off from school to stand with me, and her presence felt like the only steady thing left. Nicole Rivera and Kevin Morales were already there setting up the podium and the large photo of Grandpa Raymond that we had chosen. Principal Laura Bennett had sent a short supportive email earlier saying the school was watching, but she believed in me. We were just finishing the final sound check when the doors opened and my parents walked in uninvited. My mother, Susan Ramirez, was dressed in a crisp black outfit that screamed calculated grief, and my father, John Ramirez, followed with a folder tucked under his arm. My older brother, Michael Ramirez, was right behind them looking uncomfortable, but staying silent for now. Rachel Ramirez had arrived separately and was already seated near the front row. My mother spotted me immediately and walked straight up to the podium area, her heels clicking loud on the tile floor. She did not wait for anyone to greet her. Instead, she leaned in close enough for only me and Amanda to hear and delivered her opening line with that biting sarcasm she had perfected over years of practice. "Well, Ella, here we all are honoring the man you conveniently kept us from for 14 years. How thoughtful of you to let the community see exactly how isolated you made him feel." The jab hit straight in the chest because it flipped every memory of Grandpa Raymond's quiet lessons into something ugly, and I felt my face flush hot. Amanda squeezed my arm but stayed quiet, letting me answer. "This event is about his legacy, not your version of it," I said, keeping my voice even. My mother smiled thin and cold. "Legacy, please. The only legacy people will remember after today is how you erased us. And now we are here to correct the record." What happened next was the part that truly blindsided me, because my father had been standing back watching with this new cold calculation on his face, like he had been running numbers in his head the whole time. He did not shout or laugh this time. Instead, he stepped forward suddenly and without any warning announced to the early arrivals who were starting to fill the seats, "Before we begin, I think everyone should see the truth about how my daughter handled my father's final months." He pulled out his phone, connected it to the projector, and hit play on a shortened version of the video they had threatened. The clip started rolling on the large screen, showing a heavily edited moment from years ago, where I looked like I was arguing with Grandpa Raymond when in reality it had been a normal conversation about his health. Gasps rippled through the room, and I felt the entire event tipping sideways in real time. My mother watched with satisfaction, but my father's expression stayed flat and strategic, like this was just the opening move in a game he had already mapped out. The room buzzed with whispers, and Kevin Morales quickly stepped up to the microphone, trying to regain control. "Folks, this is not the place for family disputes," he said firmly, but the damage was already spreading. Several guests pulled out their phones, and I could see the clip being shared live, right there. Attorney David Klein, who had arrived just in time to witness it, leaned over and whispered that we could still file for defamation, but the timing was terrible. My brother Michael finally spoke up, then pulling me aside near the side door. "Ella, they are not stopping. Mom has been planning this for weeks, and Dad just wants the community to see their side. Maybe let them speak for 2 minutes and end this." His words felt like another small betrayal because even he was choosing the path of least resistance. My mother was not done. She turned back to me with fresh venom in her voice, raising it just enough for the nearest rows to hear. "You see, Ella, some of us actually cared about family the whole time, instead of building a little empire on guilt and silence. Grandpa Raymond deserved better than being hidden away by his own granddaughter who only wanted the spotlight." The sarcasm dripped so thick it made my stomach turn, and I could feel the eyes of the 150 guests shifting toward me like I was the villain in a story I had not written. Amanda whispered that we should pause the program, but before I could decide, my father did something even more shocking. He walked to the podium uninvited and addressed the crowd directly, his tone measured and cold. "My wife is right. We tried to reconnect, but Ella made sure every door stayed closed. Today, we are simply asking for the chance to say goodbye properly." The calculated move turned the entire tribute into their platform, and I stood there frozen, watching the careful event I had planned unravel in front of everyone who had ever known Grandpa Raymond. That was the breaking point. I stepped forward, took the microphone from my father's hand, and spoke into it before anyone could stop me. "This event is about honoring a man who raised me when no one else would. If you want the real story, it starts with a 6-year-old girl chasing a car that never came back." My voice stayed steady, but inside I was shaking, because saying it out loud in front of 150 people felt like ripping open an old wound. My mother's face tightened, and she hissed under her breath. "You always did love playing the victim, Ella. Some daughters never grow up." The jab landed, but I kept going, pulling out the short statement Nicole had helped me prepare. I read the parts about Grandpa Raymond's values and the community center he built, and for a moment, the room quieted. Kevin Morales nodded in support, and even Principal Laura Bennett, who had slipped in late, gave me a small, encouraging look from the back. But the video clip had already done its work. By the time the formal speeches began, a dozen more guests had their phones out, and the online shares hit 250 within the hour. My mother and my father sat in the front row looking satisfied, while my brother Michael avoided my eyes. Rachel Ramirez filmed parts of it on her phone, and I knew the edited version would be everywhere by evening. Attorney David Klein pulled me aside during a short break and said the cease and desist was ready to file, but the public narrative had already shifted and repairing my reputation at school would take months. The rest of the event passed in a blur of polite applause and awkward glances. I managed to finish the program, but the joy of honoring Grandpa Raymond had been stolen and replaced with this heavy cloud of doubt hanging over everything. After the last guest left, I stood outside with Amanda Nicole and Kevin Morales. My parents had already driven away without another word, but my phone buzzed with a private text from my father. It was the first time he had reached out alone, and the message was a strange mix of blame and something almost like regret. Ella, we did what we had to. The community needed the full picture, but I never wanted your job to suffer like this. Some doors should have stayed closed, but you forced our hand. The words felt frustrating and shocking because they admitted the damage while still making it my fault, and I could not tell if it was a real apology or just another calculated move. Amanda saw my face and asked if I was okay. I shook my head because the partial win of getting through the tribute without fully handing over the microphone came at the cost of watching my reputation crack in real time. The next few weeks proved how irreversible the loss really was. The school board called a quiet review meeting, and Principal Laura Bennett had to defend my position even though she believed me. Several parents pulled their kids from my counseling sessions, citing the family drama, and my workload dropped noticeably. Attorney David Klein won a small legal victory by getting the most defamatory parts of the video taken down, but the screenshots and whispers stayed online. My mother never called again, but she posted one final update thanking the community for finally hearing the truth, and my father sent one more text saying he hoped I would understand one day. I blocked both numbers after that. My brother Michael reached out once trying to smooth things over, but I told him the bridge was burned, and he did not push further. Rachel Ramirez and even Kevin Morales tried to mediate, but the family rift had widened into something permanent. I kept my job, but the trust from some parents never fully returned, and the community center events felt heavier now that everyone knew the backstory. Amanda stayed my closest support, and Nicole Rivera helped me set new boundaries that protected my peace. In the end, I had defended Grandpa Raymond's truth, and the tribute had gone on record as his legacy, not theirs. That was the partial victory. But the irreversible loss was the quiet understanding that my parents had succeeded in making me the outsider again, and this time, the whole Albuquerque community had watched it happen. Some doors once forced open never closed cleanly, and I learned to live with the draft that came through the gap. I sat in my living room a month later, looking at Grandpa Raymond's photo, and felt the weight settle into something quieter. The truth had held, but it had cost me pieces of the life I had built and the family I had hoped might still exist somewhere underneath the resentment. Choosing myself meant carrying that loss, and I was finally okay with the trade. Thank you for listening to my story. If you have ever stood up for the truth only to watch it cost you relationships or stability, drop a comment below and tell me what you would have done differently, because hearing your experiences reminds me I am not alone in this.